We're living our truth now. Krista, what?
Krista who?
Christadelphian?
Did you say Christian dolphin? So are you from Philadelphia?
Welcome to the Life After Leaving podcast, an ex-Christadelphian podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Zinnia, and today it's time for our very gay episode. I've been wanting to record this episode for a while because queer people exist in Christadelphia, and we know because we were once there and in the closet ourselves. But queer voices have historically not had a voice in the Christadelphian community, and their issues have been sidelined. Until today. So for this episode, I've asked a few queer ex-Christadelphians to join me for a discussion of queer LGBTQIA issues related to Christadelphia. We originally had 3 guests scheduled to join me, but unfortunately the gay man who is going to join us was unable to do so. So that's why we are going to have all women today. Today we have Bec, and you may already know that she's a lesbian if you listened to her interview in episode 36. Welcome back, Bec.
Thank you. Very excited.
And do you have anything gay with you today?
I do. I have my mug, which says, yep, woke up gay again.
Yay! And today, me and Keturah are here representing bisexuals. Our listeners may remember Keturah from episode 3 and 6, way back in season 1. Welcome back, Keturah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, welcome back. As most of our listeners know, the Christadelphians are almost entirely non-affirming, which means that they do not accept the sexuality of LGBTQ members. In fact, it's safe to say that the culture at most ecclesias leans towards aggressive homophobia. These attitudes often result in social exclusion, bullying, harassment, prohibition from different ecclesial roles, or disfellowshipping of LGBTQ members. I will note that there is at least one ecclesia that has defied that expectation and has chosen to be affirming to their LGBTQ members. So that's why I don't say all ecclesias, technically one. And each ecclesia or church, for people who are not Christadelphians, that's the same term essentially, they are technically autonomous. And so they're supposed to be able to make their own choices in reality. So they would be able to choose if they're affirming or not. The way it usually plays out is that there's a lot of pressure to maintain the cultural traditions of the community and to conform to the demands of the more influential ecclesias who will insist on uniformity. So if they don't bend to that pressure, these autonomous ecclesias may be rejected by the other ecclesias, and other Christadelphians might refuse to associate or fellowship with them for not complying. So while we're covering background information for our listeners, I also want to mention that most Christadelphian ecclesias follow the statement of faith called BASF, or Birmingham Amended Statement of Faith, which essentially stipulates what someone has to believe to be a Christadelphian and to fellowship with them. Notably, it does not mention homosexuality or queer issues at all. Are we surprised about that? That's crazy, right?
Wow.
I've actually never read it before, and I was surprised it wasn't in there.
Very believable answer. Most of us just rolled along with it. So technically, you would think that this issue shouldn't pose an issue for fellowship of members or for these affirming ecclesias. But since they're generally really conservative, fundamentalist Christians, most ecclesias hold the view that homosexuality is a sin, and sin is bad. But instead of waiting for their judge, Jesus, to make that determination, they have a tendency to dole out judgment and punishment on behalf of God. So if you hear the term BASF come up today, that is what we are referring to. And when we speak in generalities about the Christadelphians today, we'll be referring to those traditional cultural views towards homosexuality in the ecclesias that we often witnessed and were exposed to. Okay, so today I want to discuss LGBTQIA issues in Christadelphia as people who experienced it firsthand and are now free to discuss it openly since we are no longer members of that community. So to open up the episode, I wanted to give everyone a chance to talk about their experience with the Christadelphian community as it relates to their sexuality. So I do want to go around and get a brief introduction from everyone. I want to know, what it was like to realize you were queer in such a homophobic community, any stories you wanted to share that highlight the homophobia you saw or experienced. I also posted in the ex-Christadelphian Facebook group asking if anyone wanted us to anonymously share anything for their stories, because I really do think these personal stories are really important to tell and highlight how devastating their treatment of queer people is. And often these stories are really silent and not heard, but it is impacting real people the way that they are treated. So I have a few little comments from people in the group as well to share. Do you want me to share ones from ex-Christadelphians first?
Yeah, share some of those. There were some good ones.
Okay, so we got a few. One was by a private DM. Some of the other ones I saw was one ex-Christadelphian shared that the recording brother asked him not to wear pride earrings to meeting, which he had intentionally worn because he wanted people to know that he was a safe person. Another heard the suggestion from Christadelphians that you should quit your job rather than work with someone who is gay. They also reported at their ecclesia that they heard the slur fag a lot from the brothers. That was thrown around in their meeting. Another one said, quote, "There was no safe adult to seek out for support. It was incredibly lonely. I hated myself. I engaged in destructive and dangerous behaviors. I contemplated suicide. I felt completely trapped. The choice I faced was stark. Either learn to accept myself and risk losing all the people I loved, or wear a mask for the rest of my life so my family never finds out. It's a bleak and terrible choice to have to make. And in the absence of any alternatives, it felt pretty clear that the only way to stay in relationship with my family was to deny myself," unquote. Which is pretty heartbreaking, but also so relatable. Yeah. So hearing these stories, it was really sad to hear about how much people suffer and the choices that are kind of forced upon them to make in this group. So yeah, if you want, I can go first.
Yeah, I'm a mess right now. Go ahead.
So I don't have a ton. I was trying to think about this in preparation for this episode, and I was trying to think back to my earliest memory of this coming up, and I think it was elementary school, where I was talking to my sister, and I was talking about how I had crushes on other students, and she's like, "But only on the boy students, because you can't like girls." And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess so. I hadn't really thought about it, but it was funny because it made me realize I hadn't really cared growing up. It hadn't really bothered me, and I had been taught heterosexuality from a very young age. And I know I was hearing a lot of this messaging by the Christadelphians, being gay is bad, exhortations, weekends, and I know it amped up as I got into adolescence. Like this was something on all these men's mind, all these brothers who were preaching to us. I will say one embarrassing thing was I still cringe thinking about, I talked to other students in middle school being like, being gay is wrong. And horrified as an adult that was what I was raised to do. I was trying to be a good Christadelphian, and at that age, I was still in that very impressionable age. You want to please your parents, and you don't fully have your own sense of identity yet. So I understand, like, I was just being a kid in a cult, but now I'm just like, horrifying. So yeah, that's embarrassing and ironic at this point. Yeah. But I would say I realized I was bisexual probably around 14, had crushed on other girls, joined the Gay Straight Alliance in school, started kissing girls around that age, but I knew I was still a Christadelphian though, so I knew that I couldn't do anything with that. I knew I wasn't going to be able to ever really date a woman while I was in the Christadelphian community or while I was really like living at home with my family. So I knew you had to hide it. So I didn't actually start going on dates with women until I moved out on my own in my 20s. So that was sort of my story, definitely very influenced by the Christadelphian culture. And I really only heard and saw the negative towards homosexuality growing up in the Christadelphian community in my experience. And that's my story. Who wants to go next?
All right, I'll go. So I pretty much knew at a young age, maybe kindergarten. So what's that, 5? That I liked girls. Yeah, but then being in Christadelphian family, you don't do that. I did hear the word fag a lot in my family, particularly in regards to the ex-member who was supposed to be on with us today.
Yeah, I did hear about that. I heard that person was called a fairy by your family members.
Yes.
Oh my
That
God.
person messaged me that.
Yeah, so I did hear quite derogatory terms early on. Yeah, and then through teenage years it was like, no, you have to date boys. You have to date boys. You're going to marry a good Christadelphian boy. It's like, they're all gross.
Nice.
And then even up until I was married, I think it was the week after the honeymoon, there was a big get together at the Heritage College in Sydney, and I actually made a joke about someone else because I was trying to hide and deflecting.
Yeah.
I was deflecting.
Okay, so I'm not the only one who has cringeworthy things in their
No,
bathroom.
I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because then I came out as a lesbian and I made this joke about my old friend from school. So I do apologize to her for that. But yeah, that was probably the most cringe thing I ever said. And I'm like, oh, she used to think we were in a relationship, and this group of people thought it was funny, and it was more just deflection on my behalf to people think, oh, she's not a lesbian. Yeah, and then as an adult, I think I did say this in my episode about the rainbow umbrella.
Yes, you told me about the
yes.
rainbow umbrella.
So there was one Sunday, it was raining in Sydney, went to the meeting, just picked up a random colourful umbrella from the dollar shop, and it was rainbow. After the meeting had finished, we all walk out, and this one brother goes, oh, who bought the gay umbrella? And was bad-mouthing this umbrella, and is like, doesn't the rainbow belong to God? Or are you saying that the rainbow now belongs to the gays?
It apparently belongs to the gays. That was my stance. You gave it up.
To the gays, yeah.
Yeah.
In that comment, it no longer belonged to God. But yeah, and then came out as gay.
Yeah, and you've been in a very lovely relationship since, it sounds like. So that's good.
Definitely. It's nearly been 6 years.
Oh, damn. Nice. Congrats.
Yeah.
Keturah.
Oh man, I have a story. Like, I wrote an essay.
You did write an essay. It was devastating from what I read, because you did share some of it to me. It's just devastating.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Break my heart, make me cry. It's fine.
Am I going to need tissues for this? Because I did not prepare for
You
tissues.
might. I might.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm an elder millennial, so I will often use the word gay in exchange for LGBTQIA, by the way, before I get into this.
Yeah, I have to use a lot of stuff. I can't say LGBTQIA every single time. And
it's really hard.
So often I'll use queer as a catch-all. So if I say queer, I mean everybody. So
Yep,
yeah.
Me too. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out first. So I kind of knew something was different. It started in high school for me when I was dating my first and last boyfriend. In a strange twist of events, now my fiance.
Yeah, I find that so funny when you added that tidbit. But congrats to you both.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be in the place where I am now, because wow, it was tough. So yeah, I was dating a boy at the time when I started noticing that I was thinking about girls, but it was really confusing because I didn't recognize it as anything to do with gay or bi. And this is like, just shows you just how disconnected everything was. I had a boyfriend who I really, I mean, we were physical and I liked it. So how could I be gay? I honestly had no idea what it could be. It's so weird.
Well, I think part of it is the lack of education. Like, you literally don't know because you've never heard it or seen it. You're like, oh.
And this, like, I think that most Christadelphians wouldn't even be able to really identify a gay person. I think, anyway.
I could.
Yeah, the stuff that I had heard about gays and lesbians were from like Ellen DeGeneres coming out, like stories about gay rights on the news. I can recall verses from the Bible being read in meeting or in Bible class that alluded to the idea that being gay was wrong, but it wasn't really discussed much beyond that, at least until that point in time, because of that horrible thing that the Bible talked about, it didn't seem to connect to people that I had heard about in reality. And it certainly didn't feel like it connected to me.
So my freshman year of college is when I met a friend who was in the dorm, and she told me she was starting to question her sexuality, and this was shocking to me. But I slowly recognized that I felt the same way. We both had this confusion over an interest in girls, even when dating guys. And then I started to make friends with gay people and bi people, and I saw them. They were normal. Like they had normal jobs. They did normal things. It was just so different to me than what I was expecting from being a Christadelphian.
Mm-hmm. They weren't just rolling in evil deeds. Wow.
Yeah, like they seemed to be like they're made out to be these evil Satan worshipers or something. I don't know.
Basically, yeah.
It just didn't match up to reality. So I had stopped going to Sunday school when I was 16 due to like family trauma.
Yeah. Episode 3. See episode 3.
Yeah, there you go. I would still attend some Bible classes, whatever, for the first 2 years of college. Sometimes in 2000, when I was home from college, there was a youth weekend happening with like a speaker from Canada, and I do not remember who he was. No idea. We were sitting, me and about 20 other teenagers or young people, were sitting in my old ecclesia on Saturday morning, and the topic for the day I learned was the sin of homosexuality. And I remember like I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. But I also looked up to this guy. Like we all looked up to him, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. He had come before to our ecclesia, so I knew him. You know, he read all the relevant verses that we all know about against homosexuality. And then he started talking about dealing with homosexual feelings.
Okay.
And his position was that it wasn't a sin to have these feelings, but it was a sin to act on them.
Mm-hmm.
And acting on those feelings would ensure that you will not be joining your loved ones in the kingdom.
Yep.
And I remember looking around at the people in the room. Some of them were hunching over their Bibles, and I was like, I cannot be the only one here.
Statistically, you weren't.
Exactly.
It's very highly unlikely. They estimate 5 to 10% of any population is queer.
Yeah. And I think I knew that at that time. And I also was thinking, the other thing I was thinking is that I will never be able to talk to any of these people about this. And that was so painful. Anyway, we were supposed to take a break and then come back for like the afternoon lectures and then on Sunday, but I snuck out and I got in my car and I left. And I remember that like so vividly. Like I was driving away with the road empty, full of possibilities ahead of me, and in the rearview mirror was that place and those people that I realized they never really ever supported me, and they had just given me the ultimate rejection
without even knowing it, really.
Yeah. And this would be the last time that I ever stepped foot in an ecclesia or any seedy stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. That was the final straw.
Yeah. And not long after that, I burned my Bible. So, yeah, and I came out to my mom later, and the really crappy thing, and that's saying it lightly, was that my girlfriend at the time was incredibly abusive. And I really wanted to tell my mother and get her support for that.
This is where the tissues come in.
But I had to first tell her that I was gay.
Yeah, in order to talk about the relationship issues.
So I was at home from college one time, and oh my God, I was really going through hell with my girlfriend at the time. I lost 20 pounds. I started cutting myself. It was really awful.
Yeah, not healthy relationship.
Yeah, that's not good.
No. And that's when I told my mom. You reached
out. Yeah, you wanted support.
But I never got a chance to talk to her about the abuse because she was horrified by me coming out to her. She said she thought she did something wrong. She told me she shouldn't have sent me to college, and she said I was not the same daughter to her anymore.
So she broke your heart when you were already down and suffering and struggling.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
And so after that, when I went back to college, I almost became a statistic. I engaged in all the most risky activities with the seediest people that I could find. I started going to a whirlwind of drug-filled parties and raves, hanging out with and dating drug dealers. I put myself in many dangerous positions where I was, nearly
lots of bad
unalive.
things could have happened. Yeah.
But thankfully I graduated college, so that was good. But thankfully my mom, her mind was changed around by my stepfather. But many, many, many years later, through a string of, for me, horrible abusive relationships that I had, that I couldn't talk to my family about them. And I really wish that I had had that support. But when my stepdad came around, he's a non-Christadelphian. He was instrumental in changing our mind. And when I finally had the courage to leave my last girlfriend, who ended up being my wife, my mom was finally there to give me comfort and support through a terrible breakup. Anyway, but I really want to say this. No one has ever hurt me as much as my family for being gay. And I blame the religion for making them feel like they had to do that to me. I just wanted to feel safe enough to share my life with my family and to be able to freely talk about myself without them cringing or stopping me to tell me that they love me, but they don't agree with my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's of extreme importance for family to accept their loved one's sexuality if you want to have a true relationship with them.
Yes.
And if you want them in your lives, you must be open.
I should have brought
Jack,
tissues.
are you crying? I
No.
told you. See, Keturah, I'm so happy that in the end your mom was able to come around. That's really powerful, and I'm so happy to hear that for both of you, for you and her, that you were both able to grow and evolve as people and become closer. That's honestly the best outcome that we could, I feel like, really ask for with this, especially with someone who was raised in that culture.
I agree, and it just shows there's evidence that you can turn it around. My mother, she left with me when I was 16 from the Christadelphians, but she still, she reads her Bible. She still believes. I'm not actually sure if she reads her Bible, but she still
she does her readings
in the scriptures. Yeah, but
she's still Christian to some degree.
Yeah. But she came around, and it's fantastic. It's the greatest gift I could have been given. So
yeah, that's beautiful.
It's great that she finally came around.
She is an amazing person.
It's kind of crazy to once again hear about the transformation that even your mom went through after kind of leaving to some degree the Christadelphians, that her mind was able to open, her heart was able to open. It seems like once people get away from the religion and they're able to think for themselves, often their perspective changes from the conformed view that they had, where everyone had to have the same views and they were taught these ones. So it's good to see when the individuality comes out that often there's a lot of love in that.
Yeah, I'm so proud of her. She is amazing to be able to keep learning and changing throughout her life.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. I knew going into this that LGBTQ issues is going to bring up some heartbreak when we're talking about what we experience in the Christadelphians. Unfortunately, there's a lot of harm, and we are going to talk about that, as well as, like Keturah kind of brought in here, the chances for growth and evolution for people as well, and what works, how people feel with the different things that they've preached. Like you also brought up the person who preached not acting on that, but you can feel it, about how people can't talk about it. So we're also going to dive back into some of those things throughout this episode as well. So next I wanted to go into the clobber verses, the verses that have been used to defend the Christadelphian position that homosexuality is a sin as laid out by God in the Bible. For us here as ex-Christadelphians, I just want to point out that we're not seeking validation or approval from the Bible by talking about these verses and re-examining them. But for listeners who didn't grow up in the Christadelphians, this gives you an introduction to the verses that have been used to promote homophobia. And for those who were raised Christadelphian like us, I'm going to be adding some of my own thoughts to give you some new perspective on this topic. And as we go along, Bec and Keturah are more than welcome to hop in and share some thoughts and comments as well as we go through these.
I even found my Bible this morning, so you know.
You didn't burn it?
I didn't burn it.
Wow.
Look, all my notes are still in there.
Oh my God. Look at that marked King James.
Oh yeah.
Wide margin,
Wide
baby.
margin.
Oh, you look like you were so studious. You're such a good Christadelphian.
She was, until she became a heathen.
I was always a heathen.
Well, that's going to throw off the scent, let me tell you. Look at that Bible.
Yeah,
Could have fooled
that's
us.
my mask wearing, you know.
Mm-hmm. All right. So these verses have been nicknamed the clobber verses because they've been used to clobber and attack queer people. So we've got Genesis 19, Leviticus 18 and 20, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 Timothy 1, and Romans 1. So those are the ones we're going to go through. And I also want to mention, before we go into this, the Christadelphians did put out a 2-part video series, which is linked in the show notes, and it's also hosted on YouTube, with their view of LGBTQ issues. So I'll be making references to that video and the Christadelphian brother who spoke on this topic. It's pretty awful to hear what the brother says, but for our purposes today, it's a good example of their stance, and I can use it to have quotes about how Christadelphians talk about LGBTQ people. So I'll also be offering some rebuttals throughout this episode to that video, since it is very recent. It came out in 2024, and it's pretty comprehensive, as it's over an hour of content about their views on this topic. Okay, so there are a few verses in these 6 clobber chapters that come up again and again. But I also want to point out that it's not really that many when you think about it. I think it's interesting that out of 66 books of the Bible and 1,189 chapters in the King James Version Bible, which I grew up reading. Did you guys grow up reading King James too, mostly?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe 6 chapters even have a mention of homosexuality, according to Christadelphians, which doesn't actually seem like a lot when you think about it, right?
If it was such a big issue, then why wasn't it mentioned more?
Wouldn't you think it'd be in like tons of books if this is like something God really wanted to like hone in on and make sure everyone knew about? So already I'm kind of like, that's actually not that much on this, Christadelphians. And there's actually a comment that I agree with from that video. It's this quote: "We find that people who actually look at the scriptures with a predetermined notion, they misapply the scripture and twist the scripture around," unquote. And I agree with that, because I think Christadelphians have a predetermined notion around these lifestyles and are twisting scripture to suit their existing beliefs. And we'll see what you think as I go through my reasoning for why I believe that.
That whole statement just describes Christadelphia to a T.
I believe so, but I'll give my reasoning so listeners can make their own decisions. And of course, you always got to start with Genesis. Got to start in the beginning. So Genesis 19 is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. God sends 2 angels to the home of a guy called Lot. So a mob comes to his door, and they say that they want to sleep with the angels who they think are men. So presumably really hot angels, just really sexy angels. But Lot is a good, righteous man. So he offers his 2 virgin daughters to be gang raped, as a righteous man does. And Lot obviously respects that sex is between a married man and woman by offering to throw his daughters out of the door to be gang raped by strangers, as we do the sanctity of marriage in this story.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying my retelling so far?
Oh,
So
you got it. That's
All
how it is.
So the angels say that God is going to destroy the city. So Lot leaves with his family. And again, because God really respects the sanctity of heterosexual marriage, he kills Lot's wife after supposedly saving his family from destruction. Lot then grieves his dead wife by fucking both of his virgin daughters and impregnating both of them shortly after his wife is killed by God, who was supposedly saving them. And God doesn't destroy Lot after any of these actions related to the women in his life. And so I guess God and the Bible is condoning sex out of marriage, in my view, and also incest. So interesting that this story kept coming up and being shared to children and underage people repeatedly. Because at that event you're at, Keturah, I'm guessing that this story came up of Sodom and Gomorrah and homosexuality.
Oh,
so
I'm sure.
yeah, this is a great example to teach the kids heteronormative marriage, right?
This story this is one of many that always made me feel so bad about myself as a girl.
Yeah, just being a woman, I'm like, wow, what a time to be alive in that time period. Shit.
Growing up, I only ever got up to where his wife turns into salt. It wasn't until I got older and then I saw the incest. And I was like, hold on a second, what?
Yeah, and they're like, no, the moral of the story is that being gay is bad. And all the women are just like, what the fuck? What about us? Like, we were all horrified.
Just throw us out to be getting raped by all these men. No worries, women are unimportant.
If you have a problem, make your daughters offer it up to strangers to get out of that situation that you're in as a dad. Like, just use your children as like chum for the sharks. It's fine. God approves. You're a righteous man.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it feels like, that God approves.
Yeah. So there's actually a lot of problems in this story, but the one they highlight is, God must hate gay people. That's the one that the brothers choose to talk about from the platform. And it's interesting because gay urges aren't wrong. It's only if you have gay sex. These men didn't seem to have gay sex because the angels said, no, we don't consent. And they stayed inside. So again, very interesting considering the way they talk about this story. So some people say that this story is condemning sexual violence, since this is obviously a gang rape situation and not queer relationships. But the Christadelphian in that video I mentioned, he insists that that's not the problem with this story, because he heard that and mentions it in his videos. I'm like, okay, it's kind of scary that you're saying like, do a rebuttal to that. But his view kind of makes sense considering the high rate of sexual violence and coercive rape in the Christadelphians. So kind of not surprised that a brother would be like, oh, the rape's not something to be concerned about.
That's normal talk.
Normal
talk.
But knowing this Christadelphian, it makes sense.
Yeah, he was Australian, so I don't believe I heard him speak, but he's well known, and it sounds like he's on the circuit. So, like, the speaker that would get paid to preach at different ecclesias and like pay his travel expenses.
If his name came up, it was like, oh my goodness, I have to be there for that.
Yep,
he's one of those ones.
A high status brother was doing this talk. And Christadelphians will say that God destroyed Sodom because there was a lot of gay sex happening. That's pretty much what he says in there, that God wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth because of this in the video. But in Ezekiel 16:49, it says, quote, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy," unquote. So the Bible itself says that their arrogance and selfishness was the reason they were destroyed, not the gay sex. And honestly, the arrogance of the brother in that video, who was speaking on behalf of God, that God chose to get rid of them and wipe them off the face of the earth because of homosexuality, seems a little arrogant. And it seems like he's maybe a little selfish because he's not considering the needs of the LGBTQ members and minors in his communities. So by acting arrogant and selfish, he's actually acting like a sodomite. Interesting.
Oh, wouldn't he love to know that?
I'm gonna get some hate mail from his fan club. Like, how dare you?
Wait, no mentioning names.
I'm just having a Bible-based discussion. This isn't hate speech about the Christadelphians. This is just talking about what the Bible says, because it's all about what God truly wants. You know, I think he would agree with that. right?
That's a good cover.
Wouldn't
That's a
you?
good cover.
That's how he opens his fucking talk. He says that. He says, this isn't hate speech. I'm just talking about the Bible. So
Right,
if you
yeah.
can just talk about the Bible, I can just talk about the Bible.
If
There
you
you
have
go.
to start off with "this isn't hate speech," you know
Yeah,
it's
that's a
going
red
to be
flag.
hate speech. Red
Red
flag.
Okay. And one thing that was really funny to me in the video by the Christadelphians is he quotes Luke 17, where it says, in the days of Lot, back in Sodom and Gomorrah times, people were eating and drinking, buying and selling, and planting and building. What's really funny about that is that's exactly how Christadelphians describe the millennium when Christ returns.
Oh.
They'll have prosperous crops. They'll have vineyards where they'll be making wine. They'll be building their own houses to live in. They'll be planting their fields. They'll be buying and selling things. So according to that description in the Bible of Sodom and Gomorrah, the ideal world created by Jesus is actually Sodom.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is my own perspective on this. Yeah, so it's funny to actually look at this stuff and just see so much irony, and some very different takes. And again, being outside of the group, I feel like I have my own perspective on this instead of just the same arguments between people, different sides of the coin in the same community. Okay, so that's what I have for Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, next is Leviticus. We're moving through the Bible. I didn't even say anything yet, and you're laughing.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like, there's way more that I could say about Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay.
But like that might take a while. Like I just keep going.
So in Leviticus 18:22, it's translated that men should not have sex with a man as they would with a woman. That is detestable. Leviticus 20:13 is translated roughly that if a man lies with a male, they should be put to death. So that seems like God really hates homosexuality, right? And I do actually want to make a note that I discussed these verses with Professor Steve in our Biblical Studies episode in episode 31. And he studied these in the original Hebrew. So I'm actually going to pull from my notes from that episode and our transcript to review what he said about this as a biblical scholar who studied the Hebrew itself, because that's going to be way better than anything I can come up with. Yeah. And this is in stark contrast to the Christadelphian brother in that video who says that, quote, Leviticus 18:22-30 is the clearest statement you could ask for, unquote. And our question is it though?
Why are you asking?
So according to Steve, again, a very studious biblical scholar, has a doctorate in this. So I would say pretty good background here for this topic. He said, quote, the word homosexual does not occur in the Bible at all, unquote. And he explains that it was added into later translations, but was not in the original text. And I will have links to some sources on that for more detail if you're curious, but we're going to keep moving because we have a lot to cover today. But overall, Leviticus 18 is about what relatives you can and cannot have sex with, because they had to make laws about that. According to Steve, the wording at the end that modern translators often translate as men having sex with men is awkward. Apparently, it's hard to translate because it's talking about men not lying with the beddings of a woman, and it's also using incorrect grammar if you're actually reading it in the Hebrew. He also points out that it doesn't follow the structure of the rest of the prohibitions, because for the other relatives you should not have sex with, it says you should not uncover the nakedness of that person. That's the euphemism that they're using. So if it was a clear rule of men should not sleep with other men, it should basically say a man should not uncover the nakedness of another man. But it doesn't say that. So this verse is a red flag to scholars. They think that it may have been altered because of these grammatical issues in the language. So first off, he was not clear. God didn't even use the proper grammar. So the translators had to kind of insert words to try to make it a coherent sentence, which introduces a lot of ambiguity and potentially can change the meaning of it. So the next thing also I want to throw out, God didn't write the Bible. So
yes,
God not being clear, men writing this. So
men wrote it.
And third, the verse itself is confusing. So it was not clear. So what Steve thought was the best explanation for this verse, again, based on what he's read and heard in that biblical scholarship community, would actually be that a man should not have sex with a married man because he belongs to a woman. So that's where that woman's bedding comes in, as her bed, you know, what she owns. So basically, don't fucking cheat with a married man. So maybe the men who are cheating on their wives should be disfellowshipped rather than LGBTQ members, if this is the verse we're basing it on. Because these men belong to the women.
CD numbers might go down.
That's true.
That's
all true.
I do like in the King James version, it says mankind, so it doesn't specify a man.
Like a man? Yeah.
A man. So it could
like,
mean boys.
Wait a second. Did you fucking look up this verse in your fucking King James Bible right now? What in the Christadelphian is happening?
It's even colored in. I didn't color it in right then.
She just pointed down and you got a view of the Bible. It's amazing.
Old habits die hard, Bec. She literally has a Bible on her lap right now. A King James wide margin Bible, looking up verses.
I'm going to have a look in my Bible this morning and see if any of these verses are highlighted. And they are.
And they are.
All in red, because that's the sin color.
Yes, in color. Absolutely. Okay. So Steve also pointed out that the Bible wouldn't need to say that you shouldn't have sex with your father and your uncle if there was a complete prohibition on having sex with other men. So if you actually read through the other verses there, it's saying don't have sex with your dad, but you know, your cousin, I don't know. Like if he's really cute. Like he's like, well, these are the rules. But when you look at what's not said, it's not completely banning it across the board. Right? That's where perspective comes in. You're so used to hearing it one way that you often, even after leaving, you still think about it that one way. But when you relook at the context and you really start thinking, is that what it says? Often it doesn't say that. Because again, yeah, why would you need to say that? Don't have sex with your dad if you can't have sex with any man. Doesn't make sense. It also doesn't say that a woman should not lie with a woman. Another thing. So if this was God being so clear that all homosexuality is bad, where are the women? Where are the lesbians? Because it does not mention them here in Leviticus.
Women are unimportant. So
that's the thing. I think the men are so used to disregarding women and only seeing things from a male perspective. They didn't even notice that God didn't prohibit women from sleeping with other women. They didn't even notice we weren't there.
In biblical terms, I'm safe. So
God loves lesbians. That is the moral of Leviticus.
Yes, that's right.
God loves lesbians. It's the men he had to put these rules down on. He's like, you guys, you would sleep with your dad if I didn't say not to do that.
Yeah.
He's like, women as you were. Steve also talked about Leviticus 20, which says a male should not lie with a man. And I did say that specifically that way. A male shall not lie with a man. That is an abomination, according to the Lord, whatever. But Steve explained that in the traditional rabbinical interpretation, this means that an older man, that's the male, should not take advantage of the younger man. This then means that the verse is actually preaching against child sexual abuse, not homosexuality. There's a reason why they didn't do men and men. The difference there in the language between the two, the one is inclusive of boys.
Yeah, that's the mankind one.
Yep. Funny how all those things just hide that, and they just glaze right over that. They're like, no, it's about the gays. It's not about what I did last night. You know, like these guys are just like, oh, that's not about that. It's about the gays.
I do have a question about that though. Why Christadelphians change it from mankind, males inclusive?
Well, I don't know if they specifically do, or translators and the translations they prefer.
Because I can't say it's just Christadelphians, because clearly, like, other religions do it as well, and there's cases that are well known that, you know, boys are abused.
Catholics.
So, yeah, it's just interesting that they change it and take the boys away to cover themselves from that sin.
That's the thing. When you look at the people who were doing these translations, I think that they're going to put their experience and their views into how they translate. Because again, we're not reading the original language. And then those translations and those translators often build upon previous translations, is my understanding as well. So once you introduce an error or a change, it can often be carried through into future versions, is also something I've heard. So there's a lot that goes into that. And again, I know I heard a lot of argument about what version we should use and which ones are evil versus which ones are good and approved for Christadelphians. So it's interesting that they chose that one.
Yeah.
Just over time, it's just layers and layers of that gossip game that you play.
Whisper down the lane.
Yes.
Yeah. Whisper down the lane through history. I think I've said before on the podcast. That's what it feels like sometimes with certain things. Often with Christadelphian history, I feel that way. They're like, oh, someone says something that's not true, and then Christadelphians repeat it for generations. And I'm like, hey, wait, guys, it's not true. It's hundreds of years later. And that happens with the Bible too. So that's fun. The infallible word of God has changed. Fascinating. And so, yeah, I'd say that Christadelphians are a bit hypocritical when they bring up these verses. Even the brother in that video acknowledges that Christadelphians do not follow the ancient Jewish laws. They don't do blood sacrifices. They don't force circumcision on children. They don't keep the Sabbath. They don't stone people to death, etc., etc. So by that logic of their own group and how they operate, these laws are not relevant to the modern day. They are not using these laws to guide their lives. So if they were applying that consistently, these verses should not be mentioned to justify bigotry towards queer people. Because again, they're not following these ancient laws. So it's not relevant to them. And again, that Christadelphian brother brings it up and he's like, and here's his rebuttal to that we shouldn't be applying these laws to the modern day. Quote, the basic morality of the God of Israel does not change because the law was fulfilled and replaced by the law of Christ, unquote. He's like, nah, I'm still going to do that. I'm going to say it says something about God. God hates the gays, so he's still going to hate the gays even if we can't say those verses justify it. That's kind of the weird logic he has where he's like, I don't care. So they're misinterpreting this law and then still trying to apply it even when logically it should not be applied. And it's, again, fascinating because they should be taking a hard stance against pedophilia if they want to discuss this law and enforce it. But instead, what we hear about again and again in the podcast is enabling and covering up pedophilia in the community.
Yep.
Yes.
And there's more to unpack here. The Christadelphian in the video says that the morality of God, which is what he's concerned about, that basic morality of God, it includes lying, stealing, bribery, cheating, bearing false witness, adultery, fornication, hatred, and murder. Also, he has this quote, God very clearly has these morals, unquote.
Oh,
those are
really?
the things that God is
Does he?
very clearly against. So first off, no.
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 How many people has God killed?
Estimates, I went to Google, estimated that God murdered between 2.4 and 25 million people, according to the Bible. Floods, plagues, fire and brimstone. We already talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. He supposedly killed entire cities. And they're like, no.
Alone, how many did he kill? He wiped
Yeah.
out the whole planet except for 8 people. But no, can't murder.
Yeah, he hated people and he killed people all the time. So, no, God does not clearly have these morals. That is not the case, just based on what's recorded. And as well, if God's morals include being against hatred and murder, then you should stop hating queer people and stop driving them to suicide, which is,
Yes.
leading to their death, with this hurtful rhetoric. So again, if you're, trying to follow God's morality, stop with the hatred and pushing kids towards death and suicide. He also brought up the law of Christ at the end of that one, where he's talking about the law of Israel was replaced by the law of Christ. So let's talk about that too, since he brought that up. They believe that Jesus fulfilled the law and he replaced it with his new law. And what is the law of Christ? Oh, Matthew 22, 38 to 39. We're just talking about the Bible here, folks. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these 2 commandments. That is the law of Christ, to love one another. So if you're going to say that Christadelphians should be obeying the law of Christ, great. Start by preaching love. That is what Jesus' law was. That is the greatest commandment, loving your neighbor and loving God. So if you're going to say that Christadelphians should be obeying the law of Christ, that's what it says in the Bible. And he didn't say just to love people who are exactly like you. He didn't say to love the heterosexuals. Love your neighbor. That is everyone around you. That's my interpretation, at least. If a translator wants to tell me that only means heterosexuals, please offer that evidence to me. And this law of Christ is the opposite to what that Christadelphian is preaching. He is preaching hatred. He also uses Jesus's words to defend his bigotry. This one really caught my eye. He said that, quote, Jesus said to us, if the world hates you, you know it hated me before it hated you. So we are not surprised we're going to receive hatred from the world because we stay with the Bible views, unquote. So based on what we just read, Jesus was not talking about people hating you for being a bigot. That was not why the world hated Jesus. They weren't like, wow, Jesus talked about how much he hates gay people and he got so hated. Like, that wasn't what happened. That wasn't what Jesus was about at all.
That's a really good point.
Talk about twisting scripture. He's like, Jesus warned us that when we talked about hating gay people, people would hate us. Like, that's what Jesus said. I'm like, no, that's not. That is not what Jesus said. In fact, when you talk about that interaction, that was Jesus's response to a Pharisee who was an expert in the law, but basically completely heartless, who was trying to trick him into saying, what is the law? So actually, he sounds an awful lot like that Pharisee. Jesus never condemned gay people or homosexuality. In fact, he loudly and repeatedly told people not to judge others. Matthew 7, 1-2, do not judge or you too will be judged, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. So that brother needs to wash his mouth out with soap for the way he twisted the words of Jesus to justify his own bigotry and judgment against people.
Let me tell you how many times I have heard that verse, that crazy verse, and lectures talking about, like, droning on and on about this.
Yeah.
This, like, the most popular topic, or one of them. But as soon as meeting ends, rampant gossip, rampant
absolutely.
judgment.
That's like their hobby. That's their pastime. And I took part of it. That was part of the culture. As someone who was in it, I definitely did, right? Because it's part of the culture. I've gotten better since I left. I obviously I try to be very different on this podcast too. We're very respectful as much as we can be.
If you don't gossip, are you allowed to be a Christadelphian?
I think it's outlawed, actually. Yeah, it's outlawed. You're not going to fit in, let me tell you that much. You're not going to have the social status. Yeah. You're going to be the one who's gossiped about if you don't do it first.
Yeah.
So, Jesus didn't say that. And when this brother talks about getting hate from the world because he's staying with the Bible's views, that's not what's actually happening. I think what he's talking about is that when you spew hate out, it's reflected back at you. If you spread love, that love will be reflected back at you. That's a reflection of who this man is and his hateful heart. It has nothing to do with the Bible. And if you believe in the Bible and want to be Christ-like, I recommend acting the opposite way of that brother. All right, so we're done 2 of them so far. All right, next one. Corinthians. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians 6, 9-10 and 1 Timothy 1:10. And I kind of lump these together. Okay. So 1 Corinthians 6:9 says that a bunch of people won't be in the kingdom of God, including effeminate people and abusers of themselves with mankind. And 1 Timothy 1, it discusses sinners and includes people who defile themselves with mankind. So Christadelphians believe this means that gay people won't be in the kingdom, which is why they literally say that to queer people, and to no one's surprise, that's really bad for their mental health. So let's talk about what a trans person thinks about this, because I was on Instagram and I found someone with the handle JBricksArt. I believe they said their name is Jay. But they actually wanted to talk about this because they have a theology degree and studied this shit. And so I was like, yes, I want to hear a trans person talk about this. The Greek word here, whether I'm pronouncing it right or wrong, I can't tell you, arsenokoides. was not used or defined enough in the Bible to properly translate it, which I didn't realize. It was only Paul who used it in the Bible. So it wasn't like we could just go to other, you know how you open your Strong's Concordance and you look and see where else it's used in the Bible? Couldn't do that, basically, is what he's saying in non-Christadelphian terms. So instead, they were looking at how it was used in that culture during that time period to have context, to be like, what does this Greek word means that Paul is using? Fun fact, was used to mean exploitation, power imbalances, and abusive sex. So again, translators have actually changed the translation of the Bible to encourage hatred of queer people, and at least by reading it with this interpretation, instead of accurately translating what it was likely intended to mean in the original Greek. Because again, this is not about blanket homosexuality or even, a lot of stuff related to that. It's really, again, talking more about what we've been talking about earlier, abuse and power, these grown men taking something from boys. That seems to be a lot more relevant to the meaning of that original word. And you know how much Christadelphians love the original meaning of words. So I'm sure they're going to be really excited to hear about this. And once again, if you really believe in the Bible, you want to follow its original meaning, you want to hear these words from God that God left preserved for you to live your life based off of, all right, then these are the verses. You should be addressing power imbalances and sexual abuse in your ecclesias straight from God. But what we see in reality, they often remain silent and oppress marginalized groups like the LGBTQ community instead. So those are my thoughts on those verses and a little bit of what I was able to find from other people who are more educated on this than me. Because again, I'm not a biblical scholar by any means.
In those verses, again,
oh, you got some comments from your Bible?
Yeah, my Bible.
I love this.
This is hilarious. She's fact checking me in real time. She's like, actually, it says this in you.
Yeah, it says that mankind. So again, it's it's not men with men. It's inclusive.
That's actually an interesting thing that it's pretty consistent how it was translated in that version.
Yeah. 1 Timothy 1:10 says, for them that defile themselves with mankind.
Mm-hmm.
So is it men with men? I don't think so.
Yeah, it sort of doesn't seem like a committed relationship between two people to say mankind. Like, that seems pretty open-ended there. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Are they talking about orgies or something?
Right? It kind of sounds like an orgy. All of mankind all at once. Everyone goes to one place.
This is the second episode that orgies has been brought up.
Maybe orgies will keep coming up. Who knows? It could be a new chapter for this
We are
podcast.
heathens after all.
That's all we do in our free time. That's our big pastime once we leave the Christadelphians, obviously.
1 Corinthians 6, 9, abuses of themselves with mankind. So again, not men with men.
Mm-hmm. That's probably why they go for Leviticus and Genesis first, because it says men and male so specifically there. That's why I'm guessing they pull to that, even though, as we were talking about, it doesn't really make sense to use those.
If they meant homosexuals, they should have said men with men, not male.
They just or just say homosexuality. But I wonder, it's almost like that concept wasn't there in that culture to use that word. So funny. So funny. Yeah. It's almost like that wasn't a thing right then. That's not what the Bible is talking about. So we're actually already at our last one. So last one is Romans 1, and it mentions sexual impurity, men lusting after each other. So they say this chapter, it definitely condemns homosexuality. There are gay Christadelphians. There's one in particular who is very vocal, and he has a website, gaychristadelphians.org, I believe is the link. I will have it linked in the show notes. And he argues that this chapter is really talking about idol worshipers. So this condemnation that they supposedly say is towards all homosexuality probably wouldn't apply to people who are trying to be godly, because that's not who this chapter is about. And I think he's on the right track, but I don't think he's quite there based on the research that I found. After all, the Bible says, lean not on your own understanding, right? So let's dig into this a little more. Am I hamming it up enough for you guys?
Like, don't bother to use your brain.
It's just all Bible. It's all Bible here. That's all we're talking about today. It's just the Bible, you know? It's not pro LGBTQ propaganda at all. Just like theirs is not bigotry hidden behind Bible verses.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I think the key that really helps us to understand this is taking into account historical and cultural context. And I did some research. I sent you both the video that I found that I think was really good, and it includes a transcript to that video on the link. And again, it'll be in the show notes. But in that one, it talks about how essentially the culture that Paul lived in and was referencing over 2,000 years ago in a different region of the world was surprisingly pretty different to our modern culture today, if you can believe it. And so when Christadelphians read that there's this sexuality that they're referring to was against nature, they're actually just assuming that this ancient culture was full of bigots who condemned homosexuality. It doesn't actually say that. They're reading into it their modern views in our modern society. But again, the Bible itself did not say homosexuality was against nature. And the question also is, was that culturally considered to be against nature? So you really have to look at it in the context in which this was written. And again, I'm not an expert, so I'm going to be referencing that source that I will be sharing. It also wasn't very specific about what the men and women were doing. Christadelphians, again, filled in the blanks with their own very gay imaginations. They're like, oh, they were doing this raunchy gay shit. And I'm like, that's actually not in the Bible. You're getting a little too excited there, brother. You're a little too excited about the gay sex idea. You're just daydreaming about it and then talking about the telling. Okay, so first off, yes, like the gay Christadelphian said, sorry to say that, his name's Andrew. He seems like a very nice guy, but he runs the gay Christadelphians website. He was talking about pagans and idolaters. So, okay, in order to understand this, it would be helpful to understand what the pagan practices and rituals were at that time. We also need to understand the sexuality and how that worked at that time, because as it turns out, it was a very different framework than ours today. Theirs was really rooted in social hierarchy and social status. So according to this source, adultery even meant something different than it does today. So it kind of depended on the social status of the two people involved in the act. So, for example, a free man could have sex with boys, slaves, and prostitutes, men or women, and none of that would be considered adultery if this was a married man. Not a problem with any of that. But if he slept with someone else's wife or daughter, that would be adultery. Again, it comes down to status related to free versus enslaved. It comes down to the social hierarchy at the time. So there was a lot more nuance and just a completely different structure. So they're already not operating with the same social hierarchy that we have today in our cultures generically. We're around the world. Right now we're talking mostly about America and Australia. I think there's a lot of similarities between us now compared to them. But interestingly, when it talks about against nature, which Christadelphians again assume is just gay orgies, whatever else, it actually included things that are a lot more innocuous to us today. It included things like having sex during menstruation. It included using any form of contraception. And it included having sex if a partner is infertile. So as it turns out, a lot of Christadelphians would be considered as having sex against nature themselves if they've used contraception, if they've had sex while they were bleeding, and if their partner had had any sort of procedure or was sterile for some reason. And so that's kind of shocking. Continuing on, this chapter of Going Against Nature also talks about lust. So it may have been referring to a lack of self-control and essentially excessive sexual desire that Paul was condemning. Basically, if he was alive today, I think he'd be complaining about the amount of porn on the internet. Like, just a lot. If you have a porn addiction, he would probably say that you have excessive sexual desire. Paul would probably criticize that from the platform if he was alive. That's basically what I think he's kind of referring to. And he says that the women were exchanging the natural and were going against nature. Okay. So what's interesting there is that in the source I read, it says that there's very few references at that time in Jewish literature to lesbian sex at all, to women having any sort of sexual relations. So it would be kind of shocking and unlikely that Paul would just casually start a sentence being like, yeah, the women were really going at it together. Probably. This is Cindy's retelling of the Bible. Come visit us on the podcast anytime to hear my version. But instead of referring to women having intercourse, it was probably referring to particular types of intercourse that women were having. Basically, looping back to what we were talking about was against nature before, any sort of intercourse that would not produce children, such as anal sex. I got to say all the fun things on this podcast today. So Paul may have been saying that pagan women were like enjoying sex and not getting pregnant, which he found unnatural and indulgent. No surprise, really. I think of just talking to Paul.
Don't let them have any fun.
Remember? He was like, oh, it's better to not have sex.
Yeah, you can't have sex and, you
can't enjoy it. Yeah, especially you women. Yeah. Stop it.
Yeah. Just take it and fall pregnant, please.
Yeah, so it's unnatural to not get pregnant all the time like a Mormon wife. And I say that because I read a memoir and she had like 15 kids and it almost killed her. So like literally she could not have contraception and every time she had sex she got pregnant. Like she wouldn't have sex for a year and would just get pregnant every time.
It was like my nightmare.
Yeah, so she would probably during this era would have been like, oh, there's other things I could do to not get pregnant. Shit. So
they clearly didn't own a TV.
No, she was in like a hut. It was quite a story. Let me tell you, she did not have a TV. I'll tell you that. Oh, it is sad, but she's okay in the end.
Okay.
Don't cry, Keturah. Okay, and in this resource, he actually, again, talks about the same thing as the rest of the Bible. So maybe God was clear about something because it doesn't say to not have sex men with men. It talks about males. And again, like we discussed earlier, when talking about males, it includes boys. And during that time period, men having sex with boys in that culture was very common, and that behavior was associated with idolatry at the time by Jews like Paul. So the most plausible explanation based on actual research into that time, taking into account the world that Paul was living in, as well as an understanding of pagan rituals and Jewish culture at the time, is that Paul was condemning the corruption and rape of children by grown men. Surprise, surprise. Comes back to that again. And honestly, this also makes sense when you remember that God and the characters in the Bible really did not seem to care if a woman was a lesbian, right? Because again, it didn't say that either. Like I said earlier, it said men cannot lie with males. It never said women cannot lie with women. You can't uncover the nakedness of the women around you. And while it may not have been embraced or it may have even been looked down on for women to be doing that and being in those relationships at the time, it apparently wasn't really worth writing about, which is why we do not see that in the Bible. And again, we're still not seeing that in the Jewish culture and literature of this time that Paul was in. And if God really cared about this, don't you think he would have been writing something about this in the 66 books he supposedly wanted written and was inspired by him or whatever? But again, these books seem to reflect the culture in which they were written much more than you think they would if they were written by an omnipotent, timeless creator who wanted to make a timeless classic on how to live forever.
Yeah, what could that mean?
So strange. It's almost like humans had a huge part in this, more than like God. Crazy.
Again,
unthinkable.
Women are not important enough to write.
They're basically erased from the Bible, which is
Like I said in my episode about what were the women doing with King Solomon, like how many wives and concubines.
But no one cared. So even if they were going crazy having a lesbian orgy, it wasn't even news to put in the Bible about.
That's right. It's just everyday information that they didn't care about because it happens.
As long as they got pregnant every once in a while, the men were fine with it. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's right. Give me some children, pop them out.
That's the natural order. Yeah.
Do whatever in your free time, but as long as you
meet
give
that
me
standard.
a child.
Yeah. Anything else is you're fine. You're extracurriculars.
Yeah, that's right. Just don't tell me about it. So you're all good.
I don't know. They didn't want to know what they were doing other than that.
And
They didn't
the
care.
other thing that kind of comes up is men kind of didn't really count it as sex
Yes.
when it didn't involve their own appendage.
Yeah.
So there's also that where they're like, well, without me, they ain't
Like,
got nothing.
there
And
is
all the
no
women are
pleasure
like,
for
"Ha,
them.
sure.
This word should only be used in certain contexts, but to use this word, there was no penetration, so it didn't
Yeah.
count.
That's basically what they
Yeah.
were saying. Yes.
Yeah. So have as much lesbian sex as you like, but it doesn't count because there was no appendage to penetrate. Ugh,
And that
I hate
is the
word.
biblical stance. So, ladies, in ancient Jewish culture, they didn't give a shit.
Ladies, get it
Go
on.
for it. Go for it. Don't let a homophobic man tell you otherwise. It is not in the Bible. Ask him to prove where it says God does not approve of lesbians.
With all of the many, many horrible negative things, misogynist stuff that they talk about women in the Bible, if lesbianism was so bad, you'd think that they would want to talk about it so much.
Yeah.
It would be in there. It would be explicit. Like, look at how horrible women are. Because it's around every corner in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have another note. One thing I was thinking about was supposedly this brother in this is saying that Sodom and Gomorrah was so evil because it was super, super gay that God was like, I gotta wipe it off the face of the earth. Well, if consistently throughout history 5 to 10% of the population was gay, every other city over time presumably had a similar amount of gay people. And throughout the Bible, the message is basically that Israel is God's people. But we have other cultures in the Bible. You've got, the Egyptians who they get enslaved by. You've got the Babylonians. I think there's like Assyrians. You've got Canaanites. You've got all these other groups of people who are presumably also being really gay, at least in the same rates, roughly. Unless there was like something in the water with Sodom and Gomorrah specifically. This should have been able to have been an example throughout history. God should have been like, hey, they're gay again, let's do it again. And like he could have done that throughout the Bible if that was really the point, that these evil people are doing homosexuality and that makes me mad and I have to get rid of them. Then where's all the other examples?
Yeah.
Because being gay has continued to happen throughout history. Also, if being gay is one of the main messages from God and it makes him so mad that again, he has to wipe out civilizations, entire cities, why wasn't it in the 10 Commandments? Don't be gay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never thought of that.
That's the thing. I know why. Because they told you these are the only verses that talk about it. They repeat it. They say it the same way. And then they shut down your critical thinking. They say, oh, it's not for you to understand. Oh, this is God's message. Or you're also so bored that you zone out. That's actually something else that cults use. They will bore you to get you to comply, to wear you down. So whether it was just the rote repetition, conditioning your mind to only see things a certain way and ignore contradictions, the fact that they encourage you to shut down your critical thinking, or the fact that it's really boring hearing this for the 10th time in a row. Often we don't think of these things.
I do have a question though. If lesbianism and homosexuality was such an issue, why did God create us that way?
Yeah.
Yes. Aren't we created in God's image? And I can't remember the exact verse.
Yeah, but way back in like Genesis, we were made in God's image. My question was, does God have boobs?
Good question. How do we know he's really a he?
Why do we know he's a man? Does he have a dick?
If he has a dick and we're made in his own image, why don't we all have dicks?
I have a question. If we're all going to be like the angels, and the angels are neither male nor female nor given in marriage, why aren't we all non-binary?
Good.
Is God
question.
non-binary?
Yeah, like that would make the most sense for the image thing, right?
Yes, I always assumed he was non-binary but had a beard, like somehow in my mind.
You really always thought that? I love that.
Yeah, because how could he be a man or a woman? He can't be. He is all things or whatever. He's all powerful. Like
he's beautiful.
They're created in his.
But every picture I saw, he had a goddamn beard. So in my head, he's like, he's non-binary, but he has a beard. So I don't know what happened there.
They're created in his image is Genesis 1:27, just for people listening.
I hear the pages flipping in case anyone's
I love
curious where the
that.
source is. Straight from the King James.
Straight from the King James, everyone. Yeah. So it says, so God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them.
We were created in God's image. He loves us.
Yeah. So gay,
I don't know about
straight,
that.
bi.
It's the people who don't love us.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
Mm-hmm. You're hating on God's creation by hating the gay people.
No hate like Christian love.
Yeah. And God even said, like, he saw it and behold, it was good. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if he created us, if he didn't find it good, why are we still here?
That is a good question. Thousands of years later, if you failed and you already hit the reset button a couple times with like the flood and stuff, what is going on
Yeah.
now?
He wiped out the world with the flood. So, you know, a lot of gays, lesbians, trans, all of the above
Mhm.
died
Mhm.
in the flood, and yet there's still gays, lesbians,
Mhm.
queers, all of the above now. So it doesn't make sense, does it?
And I still love that I sent you that one meme where it's like, why do straight people hate gay people? You're the gay factory. You're where all the gay people come from.
Yeah.
That one made me laugh. Yeah, I also found it interesting that they're like, oh, God wants everyone to be straight. Like, it's bad if you're not straight. I'm like, okay, so this is the same God who made all of creation, right? Because most species aren't strictly heterosexual, and many
Yeah.
species do not have just two genders, male and female.
Including humans.
Yeah. And yeah, even with intersex, things like that, absolutely.
Yes.
And other medical conditions with multiple chromosomes, there's all kinds of stuff you can get into.
1 to 4% of humans are intersex.
More common than you think, absolutely. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. So I'm like, okay, well, if God established this and God made the world, why didn't he just make this rule and make all animals male and female? Why didn't he make all people male and female? Why didn't he make everyone have the same gender as well, where they're presenting the same way? Everyone's feminine, everyone's masculine. Like the birds, he went all out on birds. Have you seen a male bird? They're the most flamboyant, colorful things ever. Like, just look up birds. They are very gay, honestly. If you just look at them, like,
Yeah.
whatever you're picturing with gayness, look at the male birds.
I want to be courted like that.
And so it's funny. It's because with the gender, you would expect, oh, in our human society, the straight men are the ones who are more subdued and all of that. And the women are the ones more colorful and decorated and, you know, wearing makeup and jewelry, whatever. But in nature, often it's flipped where the men have to pursue the women and be more flashy. Like, okay, well, why would God do that? If he was so strict about sexuality and gender, what is going on here? So they also kind of ignore just the whole world as an example, all of the examples around us. So this is the end of my commentary on the clobber verses. Those are the 6 that come up time and time again that we were raised with, and these were used to justify the hatred that we experienced. But based on what I saw just while researching this and trying to learn more about it, I don't think the Bible condemns homosexuality at all. I think it was really more so the case where patriarchal-minded men chose to see homosexuality as a threat to their hierarchy and the subjugation of women, and that they also just read their own bigoted views into the Bible to see that. So Christadelphians really shouldn't be so confident in speaking on behalf of God that, oh, God says homosexuality is evil. I don't think they should speak for Jesus by saying, oh, these people, if they're gay, they're doomed. They won't be in the kingdom. And I don't think that they should continue to allow pedophiles and abusers to be protected well at the church in their ecclesias. I also don't think that if Jesus saw them at the kingdom, he would greet pedophiles and abusers from our ecclesias kindly based on the actual meaning of these verses, as far as scholars are able to tell that these verses mean. The Bible seems to consistently advocate for children and protecting them from grown men, especially who might prey on them. But instead, what we're seeing is that Christadelphians have historically reinterpreted scripture to hide that message of protecting children and preventing child abuse, and instead have hidden and enabled child abuse while also blaming homosexuals for bad behavior and claiming that homosexuality is evil. Have I changed your perspective at all on any of these? I'll ask.
my perspective hasn't changed, but I think a lot of things have been made clearer. And just knowing that it's not about the homosexuals and the lesbians and all of that. Like, they're twisting the words and changing words to suit themselves. And it's kind of like, wow, we're so ingrained in that way of thinking. It's quite ludicrous, actually.
Mm-hmm. And this is such a mainstream view, honestly, when you look at a lot of Christian groups. But it's interesting because in that video, that brother kept talking about how basically other churches were being corrupted by modern views on the Bible. And because they weren't staying like bigoted and hating gay people, any affirming churches were corrupted, essentially. And it was interesting that I would say that because it's kind of the opposite. It seems like they corrupted the word to add this doctrine, belief in that God hates gay people. And instead, the churches that are showing Christ-like love are the ones being demonized by the Christadelphians. That's actually kind of alarming, in my view.
I don't know if either of you have watched that documentary, 1946.
I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. Yes.
That was eye-opening watching that. There was just so much in that, and the chaos that changing that word to homosexual.
So for anyone who doesn't know, 1946 is a researcher's reporting, which was a movie, and I think it's becoming a book or became a book, about when they added the word homosexual to the Bible.
Oh my God, that's my next watch.
That's basically what kickstarted this doctrine or belief, whatever, going into Christianity and having obviously the impacts that it's had today. Kind of started with this mistranslation. I think the subtitle for that movie is like the mistranslation that changed the world or something like that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that the time it was changed was World War II. So I'm not saying there was, because clearly I wasn't there, but
yeah,
from what I've heard, there was a lot of homosexual activity during the war, especially in the Navy and things like that. So
as well as the women at home. I mean, both sides could have been a little lonely.
But again, they don't mention the women. The women are unimportant.
They don't need to be in history. Forget about those people.
No, they're just homemakers. But yeah, there was a lot of homosexuality in the army, the Navy, because, there's no women around. So what else are they going to do?
And there's bisexuals there to begin with, so plus the gays,
So we'll just change the word to suit our lifestyle now, and now it's a sin.
I was also kind of wondering, I remember basically during the wars, women had to get involved with the war effort at home while the men were away, whatever. And so afterwards, I heard that they were trying to force women out of the workplace and enforce gender roles again really hard just to get women out of the workplace to give men jobs. Because again, they wanted to go back to how it was with men being in control, having access to all the money, so on and so forth. So I kind of wonder if it was also trying to do that, of just like get back into the home, get back in the kitchen, and like that whole.
Probably. Yeah, because there's a huge push for that. Like, and they really tried to box women back into their gender roles. Advertisements about vacuum cleaners or whatever.
The society was having a major transformation during that time, trying to figure out, well, what should women be doing now that we've seen that they can work and they enjoy having freedom and they enjoy being able to have their own careers and not be defined by their husbands. And ever since, we've had feminism.
Yes.
Debating that age-old problem. What do we do with women?
I have do whatever the F they want.
Yes, that's the correct answer. Yes. I have a few last comments in response to that Christadelphian video before we kind of move into the next part of this, because we do a few different things we're going to discuss today. Another one of his quotes was, Jesus only acknowledged male-female marriage, which is why society's accepting of gay marriage is totally wrong in the eyes of God, unquote. And again, I thought, no. Probably because no one ever asked Jesus, like, hey, is it okay that I'm a lesbian? It's not like he had the opportunity to really be talking about homosexuality from any of the stories that I've heard. So it kind of feels like a leap of logic to me to be like, oh yeah, it's very significant that he didn't address that. And in the Bible, God said in Genesis 2:18, Bec, if you mind turning to that chapter for us.
2:18, yeah.
Sister
I'm not far
Bec.
from it.
Sister Bec, if you could come forward and read this.
Oh no, I was disfellowshipped. I'm no longer a sister.
Former Sister Bec. Heathen.
Heathen sister.
But if you want to read it to us, Genesis 2:18, Sister Heathen Bec.
From the King James Version, the authorized. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone, and I will make him a help meet for him."
Thank you. Is help mean a woman or a man there? Oh, we don't know, do we?
Neither.
Shit. Gender neutral. So from what I'm getting out of that verse in Genesis is that marriage was supposedly established because men shouldn't be alone. But what's interesting is it doesn't say that he needs a woman as his companion. It just says man should not be alone. And I would say that help meet sounds pretty gender neutral. It doesn't say man needs a wife. If he wanted to set down heterosexuality from the get-go, we're in Genesis 2. He could have said...
That was the time to do it.
Yeah, right at the beginning would probably be the right time, you would think.
Look at this perfect male-female union.
Yeah.
That is what it needs to be.
Exactly.
And you could have done that.
So when you bring a partner home, don't call them your partner. Call them your help meet, because that's what God wanted for you. He said you need a help meet, regardless of what gender they are. He was never specific about what gender.
Yeah. But going back to the traditional roles, the women in the kitchen and, the men being the men. It's interesting if you go back to Genesis 18, where the 3 angels turn up to Abraham.
Okay, more angels. Were they sexy angels?
Oh, I don't know. It just says 3 men. So,
okay. Well, they looked like men.
They didn't turn an entire town horny, so maybe not sexy.
No. Yeah, who knows with that one? But it's just interesting to see in verse 5, 18 verse 5. I will fetch a morsel of bread and comfort you, and that's coming from a man to 3 men.
You gotta comfort your man. He's a comfort man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
like
coming
during
from
the war,
Sarah.
the comfort women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. He was like, I will prepare food. It's not to the woman to prepare food.
No, but then again, in verse 6, he goes to Sarah and says, "Get in there and make it."
Yeah, did he say like make a stew out of this goat or something like that? Like kill the fatted calf or something like that.
Yeah, quickly. But he says to Sarah, "Get in the kitchen and make 3 morsels of cake."
Get in the
Sorry, I didn't invite these men into our tent. You do it.
Bec is an ancient Hebrew wife. I love it. That's like a YouTube series. I would want to watch that, actually.
I would have been stoned as a Hebrew wife. I'd be like, sorry?
You have 2 hands. You can figure it out.
As my mother always said, you have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a heartbeat. You do it.
Accurate.
Yeah.
I already talked about it a little bit before, but I find it a really interesting loophole that God really does not condemn lesbians anywhere. He's pretty much always talking about the men. And I do find it interesting that he didn't even bother to tell the women that they don't have to molest children. He's like, hey, women, you're good. I don't have to worry about you. But he's like, hey, boys, can you not molest the children? I have to make this a law because you guys haven't figured that out. And so I do find it interesting that they have this superiority complex on the platform where they're like, oh, these people are bad. You shouldn't be like these gay people. But we're hearing all these testimonials on the podcast from children raised in Christadelphia who have spoken up about this, and many more who aren't comfortable speaking up about it that we've heard from in the group. So I do think that that's something that's really relevant here to this episode, even though we're not specifically having an episode on child abuse. It seems like in the Bible, when you actually look at it, that's what it's about. In the Christadelphian video, the brother also says, quote, the Bible condemns all sex relationships other than that between a married male and female, unquote. which I don't think is true. Let's talk about biblical relationships. I've got some examples, and I'm sure Bec's going to throw some more at me when I'm done. What about Solomon and his hundreds of concubines? Were those wives? Because they were concubines. That seems like that's different. I thought God condemned a sex relationship other than that between a married man and woman.
And one man, one woman, right? They say now.
I think he had 300 concubines. There's David and Bathsheba. Remember, David killed her husband after raping her? So what about the sanctity of marriage there? There's Samson and Delilah. They were hooking up.
Her.
They were not married. He did covet. There's Tamar and her father-in-law, Judah. They weren't married. There's Abraham and Hagar. Remember, Hagar was his wife's slave that he impregnated.
What about Keturah, his concubine, who he married after Sarah died?
So there's that. Those were the ones that I thought of. And Lot and his daughters, which, I mean, we already talked about. But that seems like an awful lot of examples of men sleeping with women they weren't married to. And yet this guy's like, oh, the Bible condemns it if it's not a married woman and a man. I'm like, okay, well then why do we have all these stories about these righteous people? Righteous Lot, David, who was loved of God, Solomon the wise, who God put on the throne, Samson was so great, Abraham, the father of Israel. Excuse me, we're just glossing over some details about their sexual relationships and who they're having sex with.
Bad. I have a feeling that the same person who you were just talking about saying this, or the same people, when given those examples that you just gave, would say, oh, well, that's, or especially from Christadelphia, oh, well, that's the Old Testament. Right? We don't go by those rules anymore.
But he's using the Old Testament to make his points.
I feel like Bec has found something with all that wrestling.
What do you got, Bec?
Oh no, just one of those, dodgy relationships was it not Absalom and the sister Tamar? What was his name? Yeah, I'm just trying to find his name.
I'm seeing Amnon and Tamar were both children of King David, but had different mothers. Amnon was the son of Ahinoam, while Tamar was the daughter of Maacah. So Amnon became obsessed with Tamar, and with the help of a shrewd cousin named Jonadab, feigned illness to get her into his room, where he overpowered and raped her, and his love then turned into intense hatred, and he forced her out of the house. Absalom, Tamar's full brother, waited 2 years to murder Amnon to avenge her rape.
Yeah, that one. That's the one I was thinking of.
2 Samuel 13. If you would turn to 2 Samuel 13, former sister Keith Bec.
There it is. I was in Kings, but I was also looking for something else. So
the rape of Tamar.
Yeah. So yeah, even the king's son was just putrid.
Yes.
But it's not like he had a fantastic role model. Like his dad killed a married man.
Finally, someone says it. David sucks.
David is awful.
He's not a good person.
No, kills a married woman's husband just because he was like, I want you.
And he's king. He got what he wanted.
Yeah.
And they're like, his punishment is that she has a miscarriage. And I was like, oh, poor David.
How is that
poor
punishment?
It's a whipping boy situation. He actually punished the woman. God punished the poor woman who's grieving and got raped. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And it's like, what was she going to do? Say no? No, thank you.
Yeah, the king, he'd probably just murder her right there, cut her head off, be like, oh, you don't want to sleep with the king? Fuck you. Like, what do you think would happen?
Awful.
It was a monarchy. He was getting what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he was punished in a way, kind of. No, not really.
No.
It doesn't feel like
it's hurting an eternal kingdom feels like not being punished.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything we want to discuss before we wrap this part up?
My only thing was about Paul, which I mentioned to you this morning. So now,
if you want to bring it up, that's fine.
He says it's better to be celibate. Now, he was celibate, but is that because he was possibly gay?
Because according to Christadelphians, if you're not supposed to act on those urges, so you should be celibate if you have those urges, right? So was Paul the first Christian to be like, I'm a little gay, I should probably keep that to myself?
Or I had this thought since then, was he a pedophile? And that's why he stayed celibate.
Oh, shit. That would be really dark.
So Yeah.
I could see that. I could see it.
I don't think he was a good person, just to be honest. He did murder people. I don't really trust his judgment on things, to be honest. Personally.
For real. A lot of his stuff is the worst stuff written about women.
Yeah, he's really sexist, as far as we can tell.
So yeah, they were my two thoughts this morning. Him being celibate because he's either gay or a pedophile.
That is blowing my mind. Cool.
It's a mystery. We don't know, but it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, and that's where I'll keep it as a theory. Because,
it's a theory.
It's not like we can ask him.
Not until we're in the kingdom, Bec, baby. With all the murderers.
You get to be in the kingdom with him.
Yay! With pedophiles.
That's why it's good to be a heathen.
That's why it is good to be a heathen. Yeah. I'd rather not be with these people, especially forever. All right. So to wrap up this section, I will say that when we look at this community that they've created with the Christadelphians and the stories we're sharing about how people are treated, and then looking at this stuff today, it's pretty crazy that we're hearing so many stories of rapists and child molesters, and even we've heard, a bit about cheaters in the Christadelphians who are treated with more respect than LGBTQ individuals in the ecclesia. We've also heard of them in Pete's episode teaching coercive rape to young brothers when they're talking about getting married to young women in Christadelphia. And what's interesting is when we actually look at the Bible, it's talking about adultery, rape, and child abuse pretty frequently. But what's shocking is that what they believe it says about homosexuality was never there. And that doesn't seem to truly be what this is about. Because if this was truly about living in accordance with the Bible, we should have seen Christadelphians crack down on those behaviors, the adultery, the rape, the child abuse. That is living according to these biblical laws that they're talking about and quoting all the time with this enthusiasm and gusto. And I don't care what people think about this. This is what the Bible says. But instead of that and preaching the evils of child abuse, which I never heard in my entire life, a single exhortation on the evils of child abuse. I never did. Did either of you? Ever?
No.
Ever. Someone said, brother from the podium said, child abuse is wrong. It's in the Bible. It's wrong. No. But somehow they always, all of us across the board, multiple times heard exhortations, lectures at weekends, preaching hatred towards queer people. So that's one of my big problems from researching this. If this is about keeping out evil and living in accordance to the Bible, prove it. Prove it. Protect the children, protect the gays, clean house of all these bigoted men in power who are twisting scripture and abusing children. That's my takeaway from having researched this.
Yes.
It is incredible what they're teaching versus what the Bible seems to say. For people who supposedly care so much about the Bible, who's a Bible-based religion, who's reading their Bible, doing the readings all the time, they're missing the point.
I sent you a TikTok this morning, Zinnia. I don't know if you saw it.
I don't think
it was it was at like 9:00 or something, my time. And this person found a Bible verse, which I couldn't find the verse and chapter, but it says, all men are liars. I was like, where
like
is
a
this?
Proverbs thing, like wisdom.
God. But all men are liars. It says it, and it's like, well, who gets up on the platform every Sunday? Who wrote the Bible? Men.
Yeah. Yep. It looks like Psalms. All men are liars. How can I repay the Lord for his goodness to me?
Don't lie.
It's a good start, probably. Yeah.
What am I going to do? I lie so much.
You're not going to be in the kingdom with that attitude. So that brings us to the end of part 1 of our LGBTQ episode. You probably noticed that I didn't wrap up this conversation at the end of the episode, and that's because this episode was very long. And rather than release another 4-hour episode, I felt it was better to end this particular episode after this section that we just discussed. I hope you've been enjoying our discussion so far. I know I learned a lot working on this episode about the misinformation that Christadelphians and other Christians spread regarding queer people, and they use the Bible to justify their own hate and bitterness. But it turns out not only is the word homosexuality not in the Bible, But the people who wrote the Bible weren't even that concerned with gay sex, and neither was their God. Their argument is pretty flimsy, and the verses they use are not actually the strong foundation that they think they are to justify their own bigotry. So stay tuned next week to hear the rest of this episode. In part 2, Keturah and Bec will join me again to discuss the Christadelphian LGBTQ survey and report from 2023, which gathered data from queer Christadelphians and ex-Christadelphians alike. So that's all for today's episode, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye, everyone. That's all for today's episode. As always, I appreciate you all for listening, and if you want to show your appreciation, feel free to leave a review, like our posts on the podcast Facebook or Instagram, or share this episode with a friend. I also love hearing from you, so you can always send me a message or send an email to lifeafterleavingpodcast@gmail.com. Bye, everyone.